Imagine waking up to a world where the map you knew yesterday is being redrawn not by treaties but by force. Imagine a scenario where the world's most powerful military alliance, NATO, isn't threatened by Russia or China, but is on the brink of collapse because of a conflict between its own members. Look at this image. It is a map of Greenland, painted in the stars and stripes of the American flag, posted just hours ago by the wife of a top White House official with a single, chilling caption: "Soon." Now, you might say, we've heard this before. The US wanted to buy Greenland years ago. But pause for a moment. This time is different. This time, the world is watching in silence as the US military has just executed a raid in Venezuela, seizing a foreign leader. And now, the White House Chief of Staff is on global television telling us that international niceties are over and we live in a world governed by force. Today, the leaders of Europe and Canada have drawn a red line in the ice. The Prime Minister of Denmark has issued an ultimatum that could end the post-World War II order. If the US touches Greenland, NATO stops. Welcome to a deep dive into the most volatile geopolitical standoff of 2026. We are not talking about real estate, we are talking about the potential end of the Western alliance. Let's decode what is actually happening. Everything changed in the last 48 hours. To understand the gravity of the Greenland situation, we first have to look at Caracas. Over the weekend, U.S. forces conducted a military operation in Venezuela, seizing President Nicolás Maduro and taking him to New York to face charges. This demonstrated a shift in American foreign policy, a shift from diplomatic pressure to direct kinetic action. It was in this precise atmosphere that the Greenland question resurfaced, but it didn't resurface as a diplomatic proposal, it resurfaced as a demand. Following the Venezuela operation, a senior aide to President Trump, Stephen Miller, appeared on CNN. When asked about Greenland, he didn't mince words. He dismissed concerns about international niceties entirely. He stated, "You can talk all you want about international niceties, but we live in a world that is governed by strength, that is governed by force, that is governed by power." Miller went further, explicitly stating that for the U.S. to secure the Arctic, obviously Greenland should be part of the U.S. He even added a remark that sent shockwaves through European capitals. Nobody is going to fight the U.S. militarily over the future of Greenland. This is the context that has terrified Europe. The fear is no longer about a transaction. The fear is that the Venezuela model could be applied to a NATO ally. Today, January 6, 2026, we are witnessing an unprecedented diplomatic mobilization against the United States by its closest allies. A joint statement has been issued. This is rare. It isn't just Denmark standing alone. The leaders of France, Germany, Italy, Poland, Spain, and Britain have all signed a document backing Denmark. The statement is clear and blunt. Greenland belongs to its people. It is for Denmark and Greenland and them only to decide on matters concerning Denmark and Greenland. This is a European shield. These nations are signaling to Washington that an autocratic move on Greenland is an attack on the sovereignty of Europe itself. Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk put it most starkly today. He said that no NATO member should threaten another, warning that NATO would lose its meaning if conflict occurred within the alliance. But the most critical voice in this chorus comes from our neighbor in the north. Canada has stepped into the ring. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney has publicly backed Denmark today. Speaking from Paris, Carney emphasized that Canada and Denmark are partners in Arctic security. Carney's involvement is significant because Canada, like Denmark, is an Arctic nation. If the U.S. can unilaterally claim territory in the Arctic for security reasons, Canada's own sovereignty in the north could be theoretically questioned next. Carney stated that the future of Greenland is a decision for Greenland and for Denmark exclusively. Now let's analyze the nuclear option threatened by Denmark. Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen has given an interview that will likely go down in history books. When asked what would happen if the US used force, she didn't just speak about diplomatic protests. She said, if the US attacks another NATO country, everything stops. She clarified what everything means. She said this includes our NATO and thus the security that has been provided since the end of the Second World War. Let that sink in. A founding member of NATO is warning that the alliance, the bedrock of Western security for 80 years, will cease to function if the US pursues this path. This is the ultimate leverage. Denmark is effectively saying, you want Greenland for security? If you take it, you lose Europe. So why is the US pushing this so hard right now? Why risk the alliance? President Trump has been very clear about the why. In an interview with The Atlantic this Sunday, he said, we do need Greenland, absolutely. There are two main drivers here. First, military strategy. Trump claims that Greenland is currently covered with Russian and Chinese ships all over the place. The US views the island as essential for the ballistic missile defense system and for controlling the North Atlantic. With the Arctic ice melting, new shipping lanes are opening up, and the US fears that Denmark, with a population of less than 6 million, cannot adequately defend this massive territory against Russian and Chinese encroachment. The U.S. logic, as articulated by the administration, is that leaving such a strategic asset in the hands of a small nation like Denmark is a security liability. However, the people of Greenland see it differently. Prime Minister Jens Frederik Nielsen of Greenland spoke today, calling the U.S. approach disrespectful. While he tried to remain calm, stating, "Our country is not for sale," the anxiety is palpable. The fear is that they are becoming pawns in a great power game. Now, we have to look at the internal U.S. dynamic. It is not just the president speaking, it is the entire apparatus. We mentioned the map posted by Katie Miller with the word soon. We have the Louisiana governor, Jeff Landry, appointed as a special envoy to Greenland, openly supporting annexation. This is a coordinated pressure campaign, and despite the European outcry, the White House is doubling down. Stephen Miller's comments about the world being governed by force suggest that the administration believes Europe is bluffing. They believe that when push comes to shove, Europe needs the U.S. military more than it cares about the sovereignty of an Arctic island. This is the gamble. The U.S. is betting that might makes right. Europe is betting that the rule of law still matters. As we wrap up this analysis, we find ourselves in uncharted waters. We have the Netherlands joining the chorus of support for Denmark. We have Canada ramping up its own military investments in the Arctic in response to this instability. The question you need to ask yourself is this: if the world's superpower decides that force is the only law that matters, what happens to the concept of allies? Denmark has pledged $6.58 billion to strengthen Arctic defense to appease U.S. concerns, but will that be enough? Or will the map we saw on social media, Greenland in stars and stripes, become a reality that shatters the Western world? We will keep a close eye on this developing story. The next few days will determine if NATO survives its greatest test, not from the east, but from within.